All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast, talking college basketball. Coming up close to March, joining me today, he covers college sports for the New York Post. Great college basketball guy, Zach Braziller is here. Zach, how are you?
Mike, how are you?
Doing pretty good. Glad to be talking to you this year. And I got to say, it's been a very fun season, in my opinion. What have you thought about the whole college basketball year to date?
Yeah, no, it's to me it's been very entertaining. I think what makes it such a fun year is like there really is no team that you can say they're going to win it all. I think you know there are probably about 8 to 10 teams that I think probably could be the last team standing. I don't think there's one team where if you told me they're not going to make the Final Four, I'd be shocked. Very different from last year where it was pretty. I think everyone thought Baylor and Gonzaga were the two best teams, and that those were the last two teams standing. But to me, this year we're going in; it's a wide open tournament. Gonzaga looks great right now, but haven't really played anyone for 2 months. I know St. Mary's and San Francisco are good, but they're not great teams. They're not playing any top 25, real legit teams. I think you got teams like Baylor and Kansas and Texas Tech in the Big 12. The Big Ten's got some really good teams between, Illinois and, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State, Purdue, obviously, even Villanova and UConn and Marquette and Providence in the Big East. I mean, it's a wide open, to me, it's wide open.
Yeah, I think it's a great point you made that this is a year where you mentioned last year where basically we knew in mid-January it's Gonzaga or Baylor or the field win the championship, and we got Gonzaga and Baylor. This year you said like 8 to 10 teams that you think could make to win the title. Another couple of dozen you could see easily make the Final Four if they get hot, and like there's not even counting teams like down there like in Alabama who's beaten great teams and lost to strange teams. So like this year I think the tournament's gonna be wild.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and look, it's going to be our first. To me, it's going to be a real tournament. Last year we had limited crowds and Zoom access to players, and this year is going to be, they're not going to be locker rooms open, but it's going to be real press conference. It's going to be more, normal. Obviously, the numbers of COVID are way down. I think it's going to be a great tournament. It's going to be like the first real tournament in 3 years, which is definitely something I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely, and obviously we've been watching the season. There's a lot going on here in terms of like you've checked out pretty much like all these big conferences. So which leagues have impressed you the most thus far?
I think the Big 12 is the best league. I don't think there's any doubt. Like I mentioned before, to me, there's three legit Final Four caliber teams there in Kansas, Baylor, and Texas Tech. I think the SEC is number two. You can make the argument the two best teams in the country in the SEC with Auburn and Kentucky, and Arkansas has just been phenomenal of late. Alabama is a team that to me could make the Final Four, lose in the first round. They're a wild, they just have a wild resume. So I would go SEC two. I think then you have the Big Ten and the Big East. The Big Ten probably the slight edge. I know metrics wise they're a little better than the Big East, but I think it's pretty close. I think the Big Ten and the Big East are right there as number three. And to me, it's a huge march for the Big East. The Big East to me has had a really good year. It's really deep. You've had some real big surprise teams with Creighton, Providence, and Marquette. But the Big East needs to have a good march. The Big East, since they created the new league, hasn't ever had more than two teams in the Sweet 16. I think they're going to get 7 teams in the tournament, which is a great ratio. 7 of 11 is obviously fantastic, but they need to do well in the tournament. They need to me at least to get three of those 7 into the second weekend, and I think they will.
Yeah, and I think the team at the Big East that fascinates me the most is Providence because this is a team that was not very high. People were not very high in the beginning of the year. They are in position to win the Big East regular season title for the first time ever. It's like sort of a classic college team where Ed Cooley has a bunch of older players who are getting together. There's no real NBA prospect on it. I think it's fascinating to see what they do in the Big East tournament and the March Madness itself.
Yeah, Providence is a very interesting team. I think I saw a stat that said, KenPom has this luck metric, and they're the history of KenPom. They're the second luckiest team of all time. They've had a lot of good fortune. Let's be fair. They have. They beat Seton Hall without Seton Hall only had 7 guys because of COVID. They won at Wisconsin without Johnny Davis. They beat UConn without Adama Sanogo. So they've had some good fortune. I don't think there's any doubt. But this is a team that just finds ways to win. They don't blow anyone out. They just they play these really close white knucklers and they find ways to win. And I think there's two ways to think about them. There was one that, all right, it's going to run out. Their luck is going to run out. They're going to get in the tournament. They're going to get a bad bounce or something. Or you kind of look at them and say, it's just what a really good team does. It's a skill that they just know how to win. I think I'm kind of in the middle. I do think you have to give them credit for how they've found ways to win. There's no doubt. They just make winning plays. Jared Bynum has just been phenomenal. After last year, his first year at Providence, after coming over from UMass, he was just, at best mediocre. But he has just been so good hitting big shots. But I also do think there is some good fortune to this too. I think they're going to be a Sweet 16 team, but I don't think they're probably better than that. Look, they have about a 45 in Ken Palm. I think they have like around 30 in the net for a team that's 23-3. Those are really, really low numbers. So I do think, to summarize, I do think some of it's good fortune, but I think some of it's being a really good team. And I think they're going to win a few games in the tournament, but I don't think they're an elite team. I don't think they're as good as their record says they are, but they are a good team.
Yeah, they absolutely are a good team. I noticed that one league you not mentioned the best conference is the ACC, and I agree with you there because this might be the worst ACC I've ever seen where, yes, Duke's a national title contender. Wake Forest is good enough to make the tournament. Notre Dame probably will make a tournament, but beyond that, I mean, a lot of these teams sort of mediocre, beating out by each other. Duke's been generous, giving away some wins in the league to help the bubble cause here, but what do you think about the ACC from what you've watched this year?
It's not even this year. The ACC wasn't good last year. It's really been trending down the last few years. Duke is very good. I find it funny when you have certain bracketologists, I'm not going to, name them, that clearly like are doing the ACC's bidding with like 5 or 6 teams in the tournament, which to me is just, I find ridiculous. It's not a good league. It's not. You have one good team, and then you have the 3 or 4 mediocre teams, and then a bunch of bad teams. It's funny how you're going to have both the Big East and the ACC tournaments in New York City in a few weeks, and the ACC is going to be the JV tournament. I tweeted it. It's not even a joke. It's true. It's amazing what has happened. We all thought this was going to be this super league when all those Big East teams went, and all those Big East teams have fallen flat. Notre Dame, hasn't been good. Syracuse hasn't been good. Pittsburgh's a mess. Louisville is obviously a mess, although I'm sure Louisville is such a good program. They get the right coach in there, they'll be fine. It's the league is just North Carolina is obviously struggling. They'll probably make it just because of the name, but it's just it is what it is. It's just not a good league. I would make the argument the Mountain West and the WCC are just as good, if not better, than the ACC.
Yeah, I was joking with somebody off the air, a friend of mine, and talk about the bid thief potential. I said, this could be a league, honestly, if Duke or Wake Forest not win the league, you could have a bid thief come out of the AC, which I never thought would be possible.
Oh yeah. No, look, I still say they'll probably get 4 to 5, just because, look, the bubble is weak. Miami does, have a decent resume, so I do think Miami probably makes it. But yeah, it amazes me what this league is. And I remember the last time they were in New York City, I forgot, it might have been 2018, maybe 2019. The last time they were here, the ACC was the tournament that everyone cared about, and the Big East was kind of the JV, was the other tournament. And now this year, it's the opposite. It's just it's incredible to me what some of these programs that left the Big East have become, especially Pittsburgh and Syracuse, because these were top flight programs, years ago, and they've just absolutely fallen flat. Syracuse has had a few remarkable runs in the tournament, but they haven't really had a good regular season in a long time. They've just snuck into the tournament, and their devil magic somehow gets them to the second weekend. But if you look at it, they really haven't had a good regular season in quite a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to touch on some of the locals here. And obviously, one team, even though the bubble's weak, that's not on it is St. John's because they have not won enough games in the Big East. They didn't have a good non-conference schedule. You've seen a lot of St. John's. What went wrong for them this year?
It's funny. I was in the middle of working on my what went wrong for St. John's story. And right before the Zoom, I talked to a bunch of coaches, a bunch of analysts that's going to run in Sunday's paper. You know, I think there are a few things. Clearly, the transfers they brought in weren't as good as people thought. Now, Aaron Wheeler has been really good in league play. But aside from him, they just have not got any consistency. Joel Soriano, who while he's been getting better, doesn't really fit, and he's kind of been up and down. The two guys I thought would really help them as shooters, Steph Smith and Tariq Colburn, haven't really carved out roles for themselves. Montez Mathis fits the way they want to play, but he's just too up and down offensively. He's not a good shooter. He's not great finishing around the basket. And so it's just put so much pressure on Julian Champagnie and Posh Alexander. And they've, to me, they've been good, but they haven't quite been good enough. When they came back, you thought St. John's has two of the top 5 players in the league. And they really haven't been that. Julian has struggled some against the better teams in the league. Posh, his jump shot has not come along as, you would hope. And while he's still so good at everything else, it's tough when you're a 6-foot guard and you can't really shoot. When you look at the high major play, overall, the biggest issue for them though is down the stretch because they've been in so many of these games. They really, they've only gotten blown out a few times. They got blown out of Creighton, at Villanova, kind of they got manhandled. But really, other than that, they lost they lost a tight game at home to Seton Hall. They lost a tight game at home to Providence. They lost a tight game on the road and at home to UConn. I mean, right there, those are 4 games where if you win 2 of them, they're right in the mix. Instead of 15-12, you're 17-10, and you're right there. And the big problem is they don't have a good half-court offense. They don't run a lot of sets. They kind of rely on one-on-one stuff. And in these close games down the stretch, the games slow down. You're not getting a lot of transition opportunities. And, that to me has really been their biggest issue. They just can't close out games. And it's frustrating because, look, they're 3-5 in games decided by 5 points or less. And those 3 wins are DePaul, Monmouth. I know Monmouth had a nice year, but still, the 3 wins are DePaul, Monmouth, and Butler. So they've lost narrow games. So they're basically lost some narrow games to teams the games they really needed. And they have 2 good league wins at Xavier and at Seton Hall. Those were both basically blowout wins. So they really have just cannot win a close game over a quality team. And if you can't do that, it's really hard to have a good season.
Yeah, I've talked to them to Troy Moriel from the Seeing Red podcast quite a bit about St. John's. And one thing he's pointed out to me I think is interesting is that their non-conference schedule was so poor. They only played, I think, 3 high major programs. They didn't get in a MTE event, and you wonder maybe the fact they're struggling so much in these close games is the fact that they did not really get themselves battle tested out of the league.
Yeah, I don't think it's helped, no doubt about it. They did play in Indiana. That was a close loss. It's hard to even count. They lost to Pitt, which was brutal, even though Champagnie didn't play. And it's hard to really even count that because Pitt is such a bad team. So they really played 2 high-level teams. And even, might be a stretch to even include Indiana as a high-level team. They really played 1 elite team in the non-conference and got blown away. This is a team that has played better lately, but they put themselves in such a position where playing better late in February isn't going to get it done. I mean, I go back, to me, the games that really they're gonna look back and just agonize over are Providence at home. Providence on 1 day of rest after a huge win at Marquette, a game where St. John's really should have won. Seton Hall at home where Aiken wasn't there. 2 days later, St. John's pressed Seton Hall at will and beat them, blew them out. They didn't press them in the Saturday game at the Garden, which was a huge mistake. And then UConn at home, even without Posh, was a game they really had to win. UConn did not play well. They were on 1 day rest too, and just a game that St. John's just threw away. I mean, so like I said before, if you have 2-3 more of those wins, and to me those are games you really had to win. I mean, they're right there in the mix. It's not in the tournament, and that to me is the story of their season.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also want to give credit to Rutgers right now because Rutgers, I think 3 weeks ago, you and I both know they were nowhere near the bubble after all those bad losses they had early season. Then before ranked opponents in a row, they're basically right now, if not in like right on the bubble, safely in the field in some people's eyes. So I think it's just crazy seeing what Rutgers has done over the last month to basically put themselves right in the tournament mix.
Yeah, it's been a bizarre year for them. Some just terrible losses, lost by like 17 at Penn State. They lose at home to Lafayette. They lose at UMass, who's one of the worst teams in the A10. And then like you mentioned, they beat Michigan State, they beat Ohio State, they win at Wisconsin, beat Purdue, just some phenomenal wins. They're going to be a really tough team to judge on Selection Sunday. They need to beat Wisconsin Saturday. They really need to, at worst, split their last two, which I believe is home Penn State, and there's a road game. I forgot. It's a very winnable road game. I forgot who. I forgot the road game, but if they could go 2-1 here and win their first Big Ten game, I think they'll probably get in. They might end up in Dayton, but I do think they can get in. There are a few things about Rutgers that, kind of intrigue me. I mean, Cliff Omoruyi and Paul Mulcahy really kind of emerging the last month has kind of changed that team. Now, the problem is they still really don't have much depth. They need their starters to play really well to beat a quality team. I know Dean Reber has been better of late and has helped them, but still, they need those guys to play well. But these are, the emergence of Mulcahy and Omoruyi has really given them a really, really good starting five. You throw in Baker and Harper, and McConnell, who's had a terrific year as one of the best defenders in the Big Ten. So they are a team that could beat anyone. Now, the whole thing is they really have only have one win of note away from home. So, if the NCAA tournament was played at the RAC or, Jersey Mike's Arena, which they call it now, then yeah, they could probably make the Sweet 16. But the problem is it's been something Rutgers dealt forever, where they're just not a good road team. And they did win at Wisconsin. I actually thought they played pretty well at Purdue and lost. Purdue is obviously a terrific team. Then they went to Michigan and lost a really bad game. So now that's the one thing that's working against them is they have a lot of bad losses and they really are not a good road team. I do think they get in, but they can't afford to go something like 1-2 down the stretch and lose their first Big Ten game. I think that would be playing with fire. But I do think as long as they don't fold here late, I think worst case is Dayton, and then best case is probably like a 10 or 11 series.
Yeah, I did look up the schedule while you were talking here. The one road game is on Wednesday at Indiana. It's a big bubble game for both of those teams.
That's a harder game than I actually realized. That's a huge look, especially if they don't beat Wisconsin. That's a huge game. That's the kind of win that probably would get them in no matter what. But yeah, look, if someone would have told Rutgers fans a month ago, hey, you'd be right there on the bubble and you just got to find a way to win at Indiana, I think they'd be pretty happy to take that.
Oh, for sure. And I want to take a couple teams I think are going to be in the tournament here. We'll go to UConn, obviously. They had a big win earlier this week over Villanova, and it's probably their biggest win in a while under Dan Hurley. I feel like they'd raised the floor, but that was a win that sort of raised the ceiling a little bit. And they have a good roster there. Obviously, no Book Knight this year because he's in the NBA. But, what do you think they can do in March?
I think their ceiling is probably one win. I don't think they're good enough offensively to do more than that. I know they've had some good wins of late, but to me, they're still not good enough offensively. I know RJ Cole's been really good. I like Tyrese Martin. Sonogo is obviously a really good big. They defend, they're long, they're athletic. To me, they're going to face a team in the second round that is just going to be too much for them I think they'll probably get a 5 or 6 seed. That would be my guess, barring a huge run in the Big East tournament. I just don't. I said all summer I thought they needed another perimeter scorer. I thought they should have went in the portal and got one. They, if Tyler Pally doesn't hit threes, they really don't have enough offense outside. I do think they'll win a game in the tournament now. Not gonna be like last year where they believe they were a 7 seed and they got their doors blown off by Maryland. I just think they're going to regret not going out and getting another score that could kind of take pressure off Cole. But I do think they're good, and I think they're only getting better. He's recruiting great. The Big East obviously really helps. I love what he's doing. I know people have been on Danny about his histrionics, and I think he does need to calm down a little bit. But people need to remember what he inherited. This is his 4th year. He's going to make the tournament second straight year. He's bringing in top local recruits. If I'm a UConn fan, I'm pretty happy with where this program is headed.
Yeah, I go to Seton Hall real quick, too, because they were a team that started out this year. Gangbusters got in the polls. They pick up the big road wins at Michigan. Michigan was in the top 10. They beat Texas at home. The Rutgers win looks better. Then they had that little struggle when they came off the COVID pause and they lost a bunch of games. But I think that now they're kind of in the field. I feel like they're kind of teams got to land that 8-9 game in the first round. Is that where you see them at this moment?
Yeah, I don't, barring a huge run, I don't see them doing better than that. They're probably not going to do much worse than that. Right now, I'm not very high on Seton Hall. I just think without Bryce Aiken, they're just too limited offensively, and who knows what's going to happen with him. You hear a million things every week. Oh, he's coming back. He's coming back. He's coming back. It just doesn't happen. So I really don't think you can expect to get him back. And look, they really haven't beaten anyone of note in a while. Since they beat UConn. I know they did beat Xavier at home, but Xavier's a team that's really been, crawling to the finish line here. Seton Hall is going to be a tournament team based on their non-conference, and you can go back. I was looking at St. John's and Seton Hall basically have the same exact, conference, record. Basically, Seton Hall is 1 game better. Seton Hall has 2 really good has 2 really good wins in the league. They beat UConn and Xavier. St. John's has 2 really good wins in the league. The difference is Seton Hall went and they had some really good non-conference wins. They won at Michigan. And say what you want, Michigan's still a bubble team. So that's still a good win. It's not great, but it's good. They beat Texas at home. Texas is probably a 7 seed. They went out and they manhandled Rutgers, and Rutgers is a bubble team. So they have that non-conference record that really has lifted them up. It really is the reason they're making the tournament. They're not making it based on the Big East. Their Big East has been, kind of mediocre. Now, we do have to note they did lose at home to Villanova and at Providence with 7 guys. So that is one thing you have to say is maybe if they were at full strength or closer to full strength, they win one of those games, maybe you win both of them. The game at home against Nova with 7 guys, they almost won. So you figure if they had 1 or 2 more of their guys, they might find a way to win that game. But the bottom line is they're getting in because of their non-conference. Right now, they're finding ways to kind of hold serve here against weaker teams. But I haven't seen anything that makes me think they're ready to make a run in the Big East tournament or win a tournament game. They're just, they play defense, they rebound, but they're just not good enough offensively to me to where you're going to go in and think they're going to win a tournament game.
All right, the last thing I want to touch here is the best mid-major team in the area right now, which is Iona. And obviously, there was a little talk about them getting an at-large, but I think that went out the window. They lost the 2 league games in a row here, but if they managed to win the auto bid, the MAC down in Atlantic City, they get in the tournament. It sounds like they could be maybe on the 12 line here. What do you think their chances are to pull an upset in the first round?
I think it's decent. Especially if they can get a 12 seed. We all know about 5 12s every year in the tournament. What I like about Iona is obviously the coach is tremendous. We all know that. They have high major size. They'll defend. Now they're not a good offensive team. They don't shoot it great from 3. They don't have any guys when you watch the Clues teams were better offensively. They had more talent. Now the Clues teams never defended you. That's why those teams would get in the tournament and get waxed. Iona is going to defend. They're going to probably play slow, although they can, they do play fast at times in the league, but they'll play slow. They'll defend. They'll rebound. They'll be in the game. So yeah, when Rick Pitino is your coach and you get a guard and you have size, you got a shot. So I definitely think, I definitely think they have a shot. Let's put it this way. If you got a Xavier Iona matchup, could they win that game? 100%. No question about it. If you got, if they played in Ohio State or someone, could they win that game? Maybe not. that might be too much talent for them to overcome. But I do think they have a shot to win. And to me, Iona's the biggest local story here to the tournament. I really feel that way. Just because of Pitino and the fact that they really pushed Alabama last year as a 15 seed, and obviously they're going to be a much bigger seed this year. And kind of what Pitino says he wants to develop there, where he kind of wants to make them to the Gonzaga of the East Coast. And if they can win a game here in the tournament, that would really be impressive. And look, I fully expect them to get there. I know the MAC tournament can be unpredictable, but I think they had their little blip with those two losses. I think they're going to be fine. I don't think anyone in the MAC is beating them, especially because it's going to, especially because it's being a neutral site. I mean, one thing if they were still playing the tournament in Albany and they were playing Siena, in front of all the Siena fans, maybe that would be a little different. But the game's going to be, it's going to be at Atlantic City. There won't be really much of a home court advantage for anyone. So I fully expect them to get there. And I think, as long as they could, play well, they'll probably be a 12 seed and they'll have a shot to win a game.
Yeah, that was some fun down the stretch here for sure. Zach, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can you follow on social media and keep up your coverage in the Post?
Okay. My Twitter, it's NYPost_Z Brazil. That's Z BRAZILLE.
Absolutely. And Zach, I'm looking forward to reading the story about what went on for St. John's over the weekend. Thanks again for the time.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Have a good one.